This is the Louie T Network.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T, taking a little closer look at the MVP race. And I think it's a very tight one this year. No runaway, clear-cut, definitive winner this season. And I think a lot of guys have an opportunity to make a final strong push for that MVP trophy with Week 17. A lot of these guys still have something to play for. Some of these guys do not. And so we'll talk about the MVP race and we'll give you a winner here. Who's going to win that trophy when it's all said and done? We're going to talk about that and see who's got a realistic shot. So let's start with the running backs on this MVP, because I think I've narrowed it down to about 6. Let's call them the sensational 6. We've narrowed it down to about 6. You know, you could throw a whole bunch of different names in if you like, but these are the 6 guys that I think realistically have a legitimate shot. If you want to throw Le'Veon Bell in there, by all means, go ahead. But him missing the first 4 games of the season and the running back position being what it's been this season with these 2 guys that you see before you doing what they've done throughout the entire 16-game slate, which is something Le'Veon Bell can't lay claim to, I think it's safe to say that he would not win over either one of those 2 backs. Let's start with the running backs, though. I look at David Johnson, and I say what a phenomenal year he's had. Start the season with 15 straight consecutive games of 100 all-purpose yards. This guy's been a machine this season. 3 touchdowns last week in an upset win at Seattle. He continues to get the football into the end zone. He's about 55 to 57% of the Arizona Cardinals offense, which is insane when you sit down and actually think about what that actually means. He's more of an impact to his team than probably any other positional player outside the quarterback position in this league. Ezekiel Elliott might have something to say with that. Le'Veon Bell may have something to say about that as well. But for what he does for his team, those other teams have other weapons, other guys that you have to stop. In Arizona, you may have to stop Larry Fitzgerald. He's still getting it done even at his age. But the guy that you go into the game thinking, I got to stop him if I want to have any remote chance of beating the Arizona Cardinals, is David Johnson. And really, few teams have been able to do that this season. Luckily enough for those teams, they've been able to stop everyone else, and they've been able to get scores on that once vaunted Arizona Cardinals defense. But make no mistake about it, had the Cardinals been a much better football team record-wise this season, David Johnson's a name you would probably be hearing a lot of. But because of the fact that David Johnson is on a losing Arizona football team, Arizona Cardinals team that is, this season, that has no aspirations of playoff hopes or isn't even remotely close to the team we saw a season ago, David Johnson not going to win the MVP this season. So you can go ahead and take him off the list. You look at the other running back in this discussion, and it's Ezekiel Elliott. And I'll tell you this, had he not been a rookie, this probably could be an MVP candidacy for him this season. And I know you say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Remember, keep in mind, these voters are human. And the human element has to be taken into consideration. And because of that, you have voters who are going to use certain criteria to help eliminate some of these candidates. For example, in the case of David Johnson, he's on a losing football team. That's good enough for some of those voters to not even consider him for MVP. Fair or unfair, right or wrong, that's how some people think. Again, they're human, all right? None of these guys are perfect. So looking at Ezekiel Elliott and his body of work, there's no argument to be made that he deserves to be in this discussion. But at looking at the body of work of some of these other players and what they've done, and then you take into consideration, too, he's a rookie. He's going to win the Rookie of the Year. And they probably don't want to give him multiple trophies if they don't have to. And you take into the consideration also that he's got Dak Prescott taking some votes away from him in that same backfield. And then add to the fact that David Johnson, another running back, is going to take some votes away from him as well, because if you see him as an impact player. Other guys are going to say, hey, what about David Johnson? So that's going to hurt him as well when it comes down to getting enough votes to win the MVP trophy. But make no mistake about it, without Ezekiel Elliott's presence in Big D, there's no 13-2 right now. There's no NFC East division crown. There's no number one seed overall. He's been that big of an impact to this Cowboys football team, but he has not done it alone. That offensive line probably going to take some votes out of his hands as well because they've been so dominant this season yet again. So I think Ezekiel Elliott will get some votes. He'll be in a discussion, but when it's all said and done, there'll be enough voters that will say, hey, he's going to get the Rookie of the Year trophy. He doesn't need the MVP too. Go ahead, take Ezekiel Elliott out of this discussion as well. So then you get to the quarterbacks. And I think, this league, it's a quarterback-driven league. And so most years than not, the MVP is going to be a quarterback. Now, you've got your years where you get some defensive player playing out of his brain like J.J. Watt did a couple of years ago, and you'll get a defensive player win the MVP trophy. Or Adrian Peterson goes off for 2,000 yards. You'll get a running back or a positional player. But most seasons, the MVP trophy is going to go to a quarterback, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen this season. Let's look at two guys that started off like gangbusters and have kind of faded at the end. Let's look at Derek Carr and Matthew Stafford, and we'll start with Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford still has an opportunity to really make a statement for this MVP trophy. Now, he started out with all of these comebacks, and I think he was a dark horse. He was a guy that came off the pace a little bit. He was that horse that was on the outside, no one was paying attention to, and around that final turn, he started to whip that horse a little bit, and all of a sudden now, he came off the pace and made it interesting. But that finger injury really derailed his MVP candidacy. Hasn't played as well. His team, furthermore, hasn't played as well since he sustained the injury versus the Bears. And now you start to question whether they're even going to make the playoffs or not. We'll figure that out, and that will be determined in Week 17 at home versus the Packers, which will go a long way towards him making a statement in this MVP race. Now, if they can somehow win that game at home, clinch the NFC North, get into the postseason, and hey, the Lions could even get as high as the 2 seed. They'll need some help. Obviously, Seahawks will have to lose to the 49ers, and we've seen stranger things happen. And the Atlanta Falcons would have to lose at home to the New Orleans Saints. But like I said, not out of the realm of possibility. Those two teams lose, and they'll know everything that's in front of them by the time they hit the field on Sunday night. All the rest of the games will be over with, so they'll know what's at stake. Maybe they'll just get in as a wild card. Maybe the Redskins lose. Maybe the Bucks lose. And maybe that wild card is still sitting right there for them regardless of winning or losing. Maybe they have to win to win the division and get in. Maybe they can win the division and not only get in as a division winner, but get a first-round bye in the process. All of that is still on the table. And if Matthew Stafford can lead his team in a gutty performance on Sunday, maybe that will sway some of the MVP voters in his direction. But bottom line is, his statistics have been good this season. His team has been good this season, but not good enough to win the MVP. Regardless of what takes place in Week 17, Matthew Stafford not going to win the MVP trophy. Valiant effort, however, but not good enough to get it done. So then you go to a guy that I thought for stretches of this season was actually the leader in the clubhouse for the MVP trophy, and that is one Mr. Derek Carr, the 4 Carr, out in Oakland for the Raiders. Now, here's a guy that I look at and I say to myself, he's got all the intangibles. He's had comebacks. He's had some clutch games and throws down the stretch. I mean, starting Week 1, New Orleans, bringing his team back, throws the 2-point conversion to Michael Crabtree. They roll the dice. They win in Week 1 in New Orleans. And to me, that set the table for what was to come in the 2016 season for the Oakland Raiders, right now sitting at 12-3 with a chance to still get the number 1 seed. He's been clutch for them all season long, and that's why they're sitting in the position that they're in right now with a chance to win the division, get the number 1 seed, potentially still get their hands on the number 1 seed. They're at the 2 seed right now. This Raiders football team they've shattered all expectations for this season. A lot of Raiders fans thought they could be good, but they never thought they would be 12-3 at this point with a chance to still get the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. I don't care who you are. I don't care how loyal or how big of a Raiders fan you are. You couldn't have seen this coming, and the reason they had this opportunity in front of them is because of the Carr in his leadership and his ability to throw the football. And at times, like I said, I thought he was the leader in the clubhouse for the MVP trophy. And his body of work speaks for itself this season and what he's been able to do. He's kept the interceptions down, which is a staple of his game. The touchdown passes are there. Yards are there. He's one of those guys that has done it on a big stage this season. They've been on Sunday night. They've been on Monday night. He's played well. This guy has done everything he's needed to do to put himself and his team in a position to really do some damage this year. But, as we all know, the huge injury in week number 16 derails not only his team's chances of doing something huge come playoff time, but it also derails his chances of winning the MVP trophy. He's done quite a bit, but he's not going to get to the finish line, unfortunately. I feel like he's a guy running a marathon, and he's right there at the front of the marathon with a couple of other runners, and all of a sudden, he pulls a hammy and he can't finish the race. And he had a great shot, just as good as any of these other guys running right next to him, to pull ahead and win the race. But unfortunately, he's not going to make it to the finish line. And I think that's going to stop him from having a legitimate shot at winning this MVP trophy. Go ahead and take Derek Carr off of this list. So now, to me, you're looking at two guys, and you could also throw in Aaron Rodgers at this point. He's making a strong push, and I don't want to forget him. But to me, Aaron Rodgers right now, not going to win this MVP trophy, even though I think he's having a stellar season, and I think he's closed the gap and made it interesting. I still believe that Aaron Rodgers, due to the struggles of this Packers team this season, and even though he's rallied them, they could still lose the division and not get in. They could still win the division and get into the postseason. I still don't think this is an MVP season for Aaron Rodgers. We've seen Aaron Rodgers have MVP seasons before. He's won the trophy before. I don't think this is one of those seasons where he gets it done, but didn't want to fail to mention him. He should easily and could have been on this list of guys. His picture could have easily been up here, but I think that the last two guys that I'm going to talk about are more so in the discussion for MVP than Aaron Rodgers is. Let's start with one, Thomas Brady. He's a guy that missed the first 4 games of the season, and some will dock him for that. Remember, I'm talking about humans here, and they have their opinions and they have their biases, and there are people out there that have a vote that believe because Tom Brady missed the first 4 games that he should not have a chance at the MVP trophy. So that's going to limit some of the votes that he gets. Granted, he's still Tom Brady. He's still having a miraculous season, and he's put the Patriots in a position where they have a shot to get the number 1 seed in the AFC yet again. Now, that being said, though, Tom Brady has also been a part of a team that has played an incredibly soft schedule. I think teams that they've played this season have been well below the standard in the NFL in terms of teams that you really get excited about playing. Now, down the stretch, they had some tough games, and I thought they did a magnificent job of navigating their way through Denver and Baltimore, and even the Jets can be tough in the division. They smoked all of those teams, beat them up pretty good, and now they got one more test in front of them in the Miami Dolphins in Week 17. That being said, though, Tom Brady playing phenomenal football. We've seen this movie before. I think some of the voters are also going to have Tom Brady fatigue. You're going to have some voters that feel like, well, he's won this trophy multiple times. We don't need to give him another one. Give someone else a chance. He didn't play in all 16 games. Now, you'll have some voters that actually use the Deflategate controversy and the bogus suspension as rationale for giving him votes. Hey, he should have never missed the first 4 games. This guy's playing at a lights-out level. He's sticking it to the league. I'm going to give him my vote. So you're going to have some voters that give Tom Brady the nod just because they don't like the way the league handled Deflategate and gave him that 4-game suspension unjustly. So there's going to be some votes that Brady gets just based off the strength of that suspension and how well he's played coming off of it. But that being said, I still look at Tom Brady as a guy that could win this. And look, I think he's going to be one of the finalists. When you sit down and you come down to the final three guys in this discussion, I think Aaron Rodgers could easily sneak into that discussion, especially if they win in Week 17 and get the NFC North crown after being 4-6 at one point this season, having to win 6 straight to get in. I could easily see Aaron Rodgers sneaking into the discussion. Tom Brady, for me, is going to be in that discussion as well, but I think there's someone who's a more deserving candidate, and I don't think Brady's going to get another MVP trophy. Scratch him off the list. So that leaves us with our final MVP candidate, a guy that has been consistent all season long, and that's something that all of these guys on this wall that you see before you, and even Aaron Rodgers to a certain degree, can't lay claim to, maybe outside of David Johnson and Ezekiel Elliott, and they're fighting each other for votes, and I think they're not going to get it done because of their specific situations, Elliott being a rookie and sharing a backfield with another rookie phenom, and David Johnson just being on a bad football team, which these other players on this list can all say either we're fighting for a playoff spot or we're in the postseason this year. So I think he's going to be out of the mix as well. But here's a guy in Matt Ryan who has had a resurgence of sorts this season. Got behind a much better offensive line. Alex Mack comes into the mix and it kind of just fixes everything up front. And he's been on a team this season that has been consistent from the beginning of the season all the way to the end. They haven't really had a rough patch of the season. They've had some situations in some games where they maybe could have won, but they didn't get it done. They've battled through some injuries. They've played a tough schedule, had to go to Seattle, had to go to Denver. And this is when those teams were playing good football. Denver was undefeated early in the season. Seattle was playing good football after they got off to a slow start. And they had to go to those buildings, and they won one of those games. Arguably should have won the other had they gotten a call late in the ball game. They've played a tough schedule. Kansas City, all of those teams. Oakland, went to Oakland, won that game. There's some impressive wins here. And the centerpiece of everything they've done this season has been Deuce, Matty Ice at the quarterback position. He's done everything and then some for this football team. They've had injuries. No Julio Jones at points in this season. The running back position has been hit with injuries at times this season. Devontae Freeman has missed a couple of games. So has Tevin Coleman. He's missed his fair share. And yet the party has still been on because of Matt Ryan spreading the football around judiciously to all of his targets, making some household names out of guys you've never heard of in Taylor Gabriel and Aldrick Robinson, just to name a few. He's played the position as well as you could play it this season, and the statistics back that up and support it. He's had a couple of games, and we all thought maybe that Kansas City game might be a backbreaker for him throwing 2 interceptions, including the game-losing pick 2 to Eric Berry. But he's bounced back well from that game, has played well down the stretch, has led his team to an NFC South division crown, and they still got their eye on a first-round bye. A win versus New Orleans in Week 17 at home will clinch a first-round bye. He's done wonders with this football team. In his second year under Kyle Shanahan in this offense, Matt Ryan looks legit, and I think he is right now your front runner. Despite what ESPN says, despite what anybody else is saying, I think Matt Ryan, if they win on Sunday and they get in as the 2 seed, get a first-round bye, his body of work this season, the consistency with which he's played, had to deal with some injuries, has also played a tough schedule, and they've come out smelling like roses on the other side at 11-5. Hard to deny Matt Ryan his first MVP trophy come, what are we talking about? February, the day before the Super Bowl when they announced the winners. Hard to deny this man the MVP trophy of the National Football League in 2016 if they can get it done on Sunday, and he has another strong campaign. He's been as good as any quarterback in the league this season, and I think Matt Ryan has staked his claim as your 2016 MVP this season. So, with that being said, give the man his goods, his hardware. Matt Ryan, your 2016 NFL MVP. I'm your man, Louie T. Remember, if it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here on the Louie T Network. Aaron Rodgers going to make a strong push at the end, especially if they win the NFC North. But his season pales in comparison to what Matt Ryan has done for the Atlanta Falcons. Tom Brady will be right there in the discussion as well. But Matt Ryan, for me, is your MVP in 2016. See you next time. Have a good one.